Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for April 28th, 2025. Today I'm going to be talking about the role of the continuing British Empire, the City of London, in launching provocations to try to prevent the emergence of a new paradigm based on a new security and development architecture. Now, Lyndon LaRouche was vilified for many, many years for his identification of the origin of evil in the world as being from the City of London and its alliance with Wall Street. But London in particular he identified as the epicenter of banking and finance, of corporate cartels, of intelligence operations, all of which were engaged in a defense of a declining imperial system. Now, he identified especially the role of British intelligence in running terrorist networks and financing it through drug money laundering operations. Now, for his work on this, he was vilified as a conspiracy theorist. They went so far as to say that whenever he spoke about the British, he meant the Jews, this shows he was an anti-Semite. Well, no, it means he was opposed to the control of global networks committed to a unipolar order, which were run by the British Empire. Now, some are conceding that he was right in this, and we're seeing more and more references to this. Now, there's the old joke about the British Empire existing in the past, that 100 years ago it was powerful, but no longer today. The old Irish joke is that, courtesy of Ray McGovern, why does the sun never set on the British Empire? Because God can't trust the British in the dark. And as you can hear from my dog, he doesn't trust the British either. Now, this became a topic of discussion in China this week, where Helga Zepp-LaRouche was a panelist at a conference sponsored by the China Media Group. And she identified the ongoing battle in the world as that of the global majority to, quote, overcome 500 years of colonialism for good by no longer being exporters of raw materials, but to develop the production chain in their own countries, unquote. She continued saying, there are obviously some people who don't like that, and they would like to maintain neo-colonial forms. And by some people, she said, practitioners of geopolitics centered in the City of London and Wall Street. Now, we see this in the form of the provocations that are being launched today to destabilize the BRICS, the potential to move to a multipolar order. And let's examine how these provocations are underway and what's involved in them. We'll take two cases. One, India, Pakistan, which until recently had been relatively calm. But on April 22nd, there was a terror attack in India-controlled area of Kashmir, in which 26 tourists were killed. This has led to accusations, military mobilization, and it's very dangerous because you have to consider that both India and Pakistan are nuclear powers. Now, the Chatham House, the Center of British Intelligence, put out an almost gleeful report on this on April 25th, 3 days after the event, under the headline, Kashmir Attack Will Renew Hostilities Between India and Pakistan. And it said there will be that, quote, military escalation is likely. And that's what they would like. India is one of the founding members of the BRICS and has been at the center of a fight to pull India out by the British and the United States, despite the fact that Prime Minister Modi is very much committed to the whole policy of the BRICS. Well, what's interesting is the Pakistan Defense Minister blamed outside forces in control of terror, and he specifically named Great Britain and the United States as guilty parties for the last 30 years in sponsoring terrorism that affected the Indian subcontinent. Now, this is significant because the idea that this is something that was deployed from the outside to stop what was moving as a operation toward a new paradigm, very significant to have governments state that. A second example of this is what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. With the assassination on April 25th of Lieutenant General Moskalik of the Russian General Staff. He was assassinated in Moscow. The Russian security forces have captured the assassin, who's identified as operating on behalf of Ukraine. But a Russian official, in commenting on this, made the following statement. He said, "Remember that terrorist acts of this kind are done under the supervision and direct guidance of the British Special Services." Now, this corresponds to a report that was put out by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service last week, identifying the history of U.S.-Russian collaboration against a British-French imperial policy. And it referenced two cases in particular. One, the Crimea War, 1853 to 56, in which the British and the French mobilized against the Russian Empire to try to drive the Russians out of their presence on the Black Sea. And secondly, the Suez Crisis in 1956, in which the United States acted with Russia against the British and the French and Israel over the attempt to seize the Suez Canal. Now, these are important singularities because they show a recognition that there's something more here than just abstract individuals who carry out terrorism for whatever purposes, but that there is an intent behind these operations. An India-Pakistan war, or a continuing confrontation in Ukraine between Russia and NATO, these are specific policies of the British Empire to prevent the emergence of this new multipolar order, which would be defined as an alliance for mutual benefit among nations, especially of the global south. Now, you want more on this? Look at Starmer and Macron working together to sabotage the normalization of U.S.-Russian relations by continuing the war in Ukraine. Now, contrast that with something which took place this last weekend, the commemoration of the Spirit of the Elbe, the meeting on April 25th, 1945, of U.S. and Red Army forces on a bridge over the Elbe River as they were driving the Nazis out of power, April 25th, 1945. So 80 years ago. And as they met there, they pledged to act together so that all nations should, quote, work together for the mutual benefit of all people. That's the idea of a new paradigm, a mutual benefit that affects everyone in the world and that operates from the standpoint that through negotiation and diplomacy, we can resolve the conditions that lead to war. So who benefits from war? Well, those who want to sustain a status quo. And the Executive Intelligence Review, the publication founded by Lyndon LaRouche, has a long history of exposing the British role in these operations. And I've linked some examples in the description section on the role of the British behind terrorism and behind drug trafficking. Now, this move toward a multipolar world is this idea of an alliance of nations acting as sovereign nations, acting for mutual benefit. That's what the empire wants to stop today. Whether it's war conducted against Russia from Ukraine by NATO, which now that Trump wants to break it, we see Starmer from London taking the lead in continuing it. And in Southwest Asia, we see Netanyahu, whose Zionist movement was created by the British precisely to give them a hand in manipulating the situation in that part of the world, which is continuing to this very day. So the empire is trying to stop the emergence of a new paradigm. Now, the reason to discuss this is that we are calling on citizens of the world to join us to see to it that we can bring together the forces for this new alliance and end this danger of nuclear war, whether it's through terrorism, whether it's through assassinations, regime change, whatever. That the benefit of all humanity depends on breaking this cycle of violence, which is underwritten and controlled and directed by the City of London and its related corporate cartels from the United States and the European Union. So this is the fight that we have to take. It's been forced upon us. It's one that's been won in the past, but never fully completed. Now we have an opportunity to complete the victory. So join us, become part of that fight.